As banal as McMurdo appears, it turns out it is filled with these professional dreamers.
At night, laying in my bed here in McMurdo, I am again walking across the top of B-15. Might as well be on a piece of the South Pole, but yet I'm actually adrift in the ocean, a vagabond floating in the ocean. And below my feet, I can feel the rumble of the iceberg. I can feel the change, the cry of the iceberg as it's screeching and as it's bouncing off the seabed, as it's steering the ocean currents, as it's beginning to move north. I can feel that sound coming up through the bottoms of my feet and telling me that this iceberg is coming north. That's my dream. So here I'm sitting in this lovely warm lab, and just outside is the environment that Scott and Shackleton first faced when they came here about 100 years ago. Unlike Scott and Shackleton, who viewed the ice as this sort of static monster that had to be crossed to get to the South Pole, we scientists now are able to see the ice as a dynamic living entity that is sort of producing change, like the icebergs that I study. For me, it's been a wild ride. First of all, I found out that the iceberg that I came down to study not only was larger than the iceberg that sank the Titanic, it was not only larger than the Titanic itself, but it was larger than the country that built the Titanic. That's pretty big. This is B-15. So what we see here is the White Cliff. It's about 150 feet tall. So that means that there's over 1,000 feet of ice below the waterline. This iceberg is so big that the water that it contains would run the flow of the River Jordan for 1,000 years. It's so big that the water that is inside of it would run the River Nile for 75 years. This is a little bit of video that we shot when we were flying up to the iceberg. It looks big and it looms above us. Even if we're on an aircraft flying above the iceberg is always above us. It's above us because it's a mystery that we don't understand. Here's a picture of what it looked like once we had arrived in the center of the iceberg. We put out our instruments. Now we're going to have an opportunity to monitor how the iceberg drifts north. They're so big, there's an element of fear. We don't know really what's going to come ahead when they eventually begin to melt in the ocean beyond Antarctica. What we're seeing now here is a time-lapse sort of animation of satellite imagery of the sea ice and of the continent of Antarctica. And what you see are three shades of gray. This sort of lighter shade of gray is the sea ice. And these little bits and pieces here, these are Titanic icebergs. This little fellow right here, he's not a very big iceberg compared to these other ones, but that guy there might be the size of the island of Sicily in the Mediterranean. It's like a little tiny bumblebee zipping around in a circle, happy to be in the warm waters as it's drifting north. I'd be happy to see Antarctica as a static, monolithic environment, a cold monolith of ice, sort of the way the people back in the past used to see it. But now, our comfortable thought about Antarctica is over. Now we're seeing it as a living being that's dynamic, that's producing change. Change that it's broadcasting to the rest of the world, possibly in response to what the world is broadcasting down to Antarctica. Certainly on a gut level, it's going to be frightening to watch what happens to these babies once they get north.